Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to Radical Disruption. I absolutely loved overhearing this conversation during my Austin Mastermind Retreat that I hosted a few weeks ago. And that is all about how are different people structuring their day to day in their business? How many hours are they working? How are they planning for different seasons in their life and different seasons in their business? And that is the conversation that I want to bring to you today is talking about how I structure my day to day as well as how I plan for seasons. Now, my day to day is Monday through Friday. That's typically when I work. I never work on Sundays, never, never, never. I haven't for many, many years now. And Saturdays, I typically don't work on Saturdays unless I wasn't able to get done something during the week that like I really needed to get done, or if I wasn't able to work enough hours during the week. And enough just meaning that like I had, important things that I had to get done that I wasn't able to get done. So typically I don't work on Saturdays, but there might be like an hour or two on, some Saturdays here and there that I do work. Monday through Friday, I wake up anywhere between 7 to 8 a.m. And if I'm waking up at 8, that means that I did not sleep well last night. And so I was sleeping in a little bit, and my husband was letting me sleep in. And if I do wake up at 7, though, that's like my ideal. I would love to wake up at 7. I'm not an early morning person, so I don't really love waking up any earlier than 7. But right around 7, maybe 7:30, I will wake up. I will go and make breakfast for me and for the girls. My husband at that time will usually do an hour of work. And while he's working for an hour, that's when I'm cooking. That's when I am, feeding the girls, feeding myself, also getting myself ready to go and work out. After he's done with his hour of work, then we will go work out together. We have a shop and we work out in the shop together. So we work out for, an hour or maybe an hour and a half. I say an hour and a half because not because I actually work out for an hour and a half, but because it's just hectic with kids when you're working out. They're crawling all over you. I'm like taking a break to breastfeed, or I'm taking 60 breaks to breastfeed, or I'm breastfeeding while I am actually working out. The kids are running wild, the kids are crying, the kids need snacks, the kids need to go to the bathroom. So sometimes it's an hour and a half, but usually that just means that my workout is 45 minutes and then the other 45 minutes was spent, wrangling children. And so there's a little bit of leeway there. So I don't know what does that time frame leave us at? Like, so anywhere between 9:30, 10 is when we're typically done there, and then my husband will work for another hour. And during that time I have the girls. We're either out playing outside. Sometimes I'm showering and getting ready while they're also just running around the room. Sometimes that is getting them snacks, but it's typically like me being with the girls and we're playing. Also during the summer, that's a really great time for me to do yard work, so I'll be in the garden. I'll be watering things, pulling weeds, just doing the endless amount of yard work that just happens when you have a yard. And then after he's done working for an hour, I usually will start work around like 11:30, 12, just depends. And before I was recording, or before I sat down to record this episode, I was thinking about, my typical schedule, and I was like, why do I do that? Because what that usually means is I sit down to work for like 10, 20, 30 minutes, and then I'm like, oh, actually I'm really hungry, so I'm going to go and make lunch now. And for lunch I usually am, taking 30, 45 minutes. If I'm like cooking lunch, then maybe even a little bit more, and then eating and feeding the girls. And so I'm like, why do I do that? Because then like breaks up my work schedule, or my workflow. And so I try not to get too in the zone if I'm going to sit down and work for a little bit and then eat lunch after that. And from there, I will typically work, so after lunch all the way up until about 5 o'clock, sometimes 4:30, but usually around 5 o'clock is when I try to clock out. And I will then go make dinner, and then just the rest of the night is with the girls, and we're just out as a family having fun and doing fun stuff like that. Fun stuff like that, as in hiking, as in boating, as in whatever it is, just depending on the season. And that is my typical day. Now, full transparency, does every single day look like that? No. Also, full transparency, am I someone that loves a schedule? Yes, I do. I would love to tell you that I don't love a schedule, or that I'm like, like a really like chill person, like go with the flow. Reality is I'm not. And if I were here telling you that, my husband would call BS on it. So I'm just gonna, this is just who I am. I love a good schedule. I'm trying to be better. about when things don't go quite as scheduled and like being more flexible that way. Kids really help with that for sure, because there are times where like, I have two two and under, and sometimes the kids just need you, and maybe that means that I'm only working 1 hour that day, and then maybe that means that the next day that I work a little bit more if that's possible. So there's definitely a lot of flexibility there with that schedule, but I would say that that is a pretty dang typical schedule for me in terms of work right now. Now, that being said, during the summer months, I typically work less. And so that schedule that I just ran you through, there might be, 1 to 2 hours during the 12 to 5 window where I am actually outside and playing with the girls. And that will then bump, my like hourly work day to 2 to 3 hours instead of like closer to 5 hours. And I just do that because I love being outside. I'm like looking outside right now, and I'm like, after I'm done with this podcast episode, I'm gonna go outside, I'm gonna enjoy the weather. And it's just so nice here in Idaho during the summer. And I want to take full advantage of that, which kind of ties into the conversation around seasons. I definitely plan my business around seasons, not just like seasons in life, like, oh, like pregnancy and postpartum. Like, yes, 100% that, but like the actual seasons. Like during the winter, I have a heavier workload. That's typically when I am creating offers. If I have any like big launches, I try and schedule those during the winter. If I have any big projects, like maybe I want to, revamp my entire website, or maybe I want to, burn down a funnel and create a new one. Like I try to do those big projects during the winter because I'm, working longer days, but I also just have more capacity during that time. And then during the summer, I am doing more of just like the maintenance. Just obviously, I have to still work because, there's things you just have to do in a business, and there's still projects that I work on, but I give myself grace to have those projects done in a longer time frame than if I were to have done that during the winter. Maybe I do need to update a funnel during the summer. Well, it might take me, 4 weeks instead of 1 week during the, summer versus during the winter. So just a little bit that way. And again, this is just my personal preference because during the winter it's cold. I'm typically not wanting to be outside. We still do a lot of fun things, but it's just not the same. I have more time to work, and I don't feel like I'm missing out on as much during the winter versus during the summer. I'm like, okay, let's go out and go boating. If my dad texts me, he's like, hey, we're going out on the river, we're going to go boating. It's like a Tuesday at 2 o'clock. 100% I'm saying yes to that. And if my mom's like, hey, like I want to go on a walk on the canyon, like do you want to go? And it's a Thursday at 11 a.m. Like, of course I'm going to say yes to that. So during the summer, like I am a yes woman. I'm like, anything that we want to go out and do, like let's go out and do it. And if that bumps things back in terms of time frame, I'm totally okay with that. And again, I have just scheduled my business that way. So if I'm looking at my calendar, like Q1 and like Q2, well, like half of Q2 is more of like that heavy work. And then like Q3, well, at the end of Q2, definitely Q3. And then Q4 is again like going back into the winter. So that's another like heavy workload time period, but also that's the holiday season too. So there's a lot of like breaks that happen in there. All that to be said, I am very much in like the 15 to 20 hour work week. And it's been a long time since I have like had more of a like worked more hours than that in a week. Sometimes though, my hours are not 12 to 5. Sometimes I'm spending a lot of time in the evenings, like once the girls go down for bed, that I'm working there. So it's not 100% dead set. Again, I love my structure, but there is a lot of ebbs and flows. And I'm also so grateful to be able to run a business and have the flexibility of that, where I can, maybe I only worked 1 hour during the day, but I could work, 2, 3 hours once the girls go to bed, and still go to bed on time and get a good night's rest. And there are still times too where, I just like 2, 3 weeks ago, I was running Our Rich live, and I was also building it as I was running it live, which was not such a great idea. But there were some nights where I was up till 2 a.m. while everyone was asleep, and I was just up building, and I got a lot of work done. It was very productive because the house was very quiet and I was just like in my zone. But there are some nights of course, always going to be transparent with you where I am working longer, especially if it's during a launch or I am creating an offer or, you know, I don't know. There's just times where that happens. But I hope that this was interesting and insightful. And of course, your day does not have to look anything like mine. I am such a believer that there's no one perfect formula of like, oh, if you want to, be successful, you have to wake up at 4 a.m. and you have to work out and then you have to do this and you have to meditate for 50 hours and then journal and then do this. It's like all those things are great, but like the way that you schedule out your day, like that's on you. One of the girls who was on the Austin Mastermind Retreat, she was talking about how I think she wakes up at 4 a.m. I want to say that's what it is. If it's not 4 a.m., it's 5 a.m. But I'm pretty sure it was 4 a.m. because I was like, holy crap, that is insanity. Like, I could never. 4 a.m. is like when I'm getting my deepest rest. But again, it's just there's so many ways to be successful, so many ways to structure your day. And you got to do what works best for you and figuring out too, like, when do you work best during the day? Are you most productive in the morning? Are you most productive in the afternoon? Are you the most productive at night? Like, you can totally schedule your day around when you're most productive, when your brain is working the best. And that's what I would recommend. Like, what works for me is not going to be what works for you. So you got to figure that one out.